Hello, I'm Ziki Nelson, co-founder of Kugali, and I'm DEFO RECO. Kugali is an entertainment company that uses comics, art, and animation to showcase the best of African culture and African narratives. Growing up, I've always been really interested in storytelling. In fact, I can't even remember when I first started coming up with my own original stories. Of course, as a 7-year-old, they weren't quite as good as they are now. At least I hope so. And I thought of many different routes I wanted to take into storytelling, but what spoke to me the most were comic books and animation. So that's where I wanted to try my hand. I wanted to write stories for cartoons and I wanted to write stories for comics. And when I was thinking of how to stand out, it dawned on me that if I drew from my own culture, because I'm from Nigeria, if I drew from my own culture, then I could actually bring something new to the world of storytelling rather than rehashing stories that have already been told. And at the same time, my friends who are now co-founders were going through similar paths. So we all decided to join our hands together and start this project. Sure. So I was born in Lagos, Nigeria, lived there till I was 50 before moving to the UK. And I think when you're young, you don't spend that much time reflecting. So at the time, I was just really going with the flow. I wasn't really too bothered with my environment. As long as I could have fun, play video games, and go to parties, then I was good. But now that I think back on it, there was a huge change in culture growing up in Lagos and then moving to the UK. Because initially, when I moved to the UK, I moved to a village in Wales for boarding school, which is like a town of 20,000 people. I was coming from a city that had about 5+ million people, and it's very hard to summarize. I think that the culture in Lagos is a lot more familial. I mean, in other words, people assume familiarity, whereas over here there's sort of a distant way you interact with people, sort of like a cold respect, not necessarily cold, but just a bit more respectful. Whereas back home, everyone kind of treats each other like family, which can be annoying sometimes, particularly in professional situations. But yeah, that's just the first thing that came to my mind. Inspiration for stories is maybe the hardest thing that I haven't quite been able to conquer yet. I All I know right now is I have a process. It's one of those things where you you take a series of actions and then you get a series of results. You don't quite understand why the actions lead to the results, but hey, it works. So one of the things is trying to write first thing in the morning. I mean, after you've showered and brushed your teeth and all that. But trying to write the first thing in the morning, my hypothesis is that once you allow the world to start infecting your mind, then you enter what I think of as reactive mode. You know, people are sending emails and you're no longer able to set the tone for what you want to do. And for creativity and coming up with stories, it's important that your mental headspace is clear and you decide how you want to navigate. So that's the first thing. The other thing is just trying to immerse yourself in different situations, trying to read and study. So in terms of building stories, you want to draw influence from as many different areas as possible. You want to draw influence from the people around you. You want to draw influence from whatever it is that you're fascinated by. For me, it's myths and legends. So I try and read as many stories about ancient heroes and ancient gods, etc., etc. And you also want to put yourself in real life, interesting situations that you can then recapture in your stories and extrapolate. So it's a mixture of all of those things. So Kugali publishes two imprints. One is the regular edition, which is a lot of sci-fi, fantasy, and superhero type stories. And then we have the Raki edition, which is more horror, thriller, and darker tales, which is the one that I contribute to as a writer. So I'm a bit more partial to the Raki edition. And what or at least what I try and do personally, I'll start with myself, is that I try and look at the things that where like I try and look at human psychology, and I try and think, okay, where are we fragile? What are our fears? What are our deepest concerns? And then I try and extrapolate those and take them to the extreme. So one of the stories I'm working on is about a character who's followed around by the spirit of everyone that they've killed, and it's supposed to represent guilt. And then what I try and do then is combine that with a traditional African setting so that it's almost like a passively educational experience as well. It's just like, oh, I didn't know that they did this in 13th century West Africa, etc., etc. So in general, I think all of the stories try to entertain using the various genres, but then they infuse aspects of their culture, aspects of African culture, so that it's a completely new and novel experience, particularly with the aesthetics. I mean, some of the things are really, really cool, where you have like science fiction through the lens of African art and design, and you see a completely different future that is completely atypical to the standard Western science fiction sort of sleek and Iron Man like future. So the future, or the Afrofuturist future, is just completely different. So you have like spaceships that look like traditional African boats or masks, and these are just a few of the things that we play around with in the studio. Or when people read this, I want them to feel a sense of awe, like, what is this that I've just seen? I remember I'm a huge fan of Japanese manga and anime, and I remember I literally saw 15. There was an advert for Dragon Ball Z, and I just tuned in for the last 10 seconds, and I just remember just 10 seconds of seeing this as an I was 12 years old. As a 12-year-old, I didn't know what it was, but I saw this and I was like, this is cool. I need to find what this thing is. And then I dived deeper into the world of Japanese anime and manga, and I was like, wow, my mind is completely blown. This is so different to what I've seen before, and I want more of it. We transitioned from doing solely digital comics to physical comics because the demand, we didn't realize it at the time, but the demand for physical was much higher. What happened was we were invited to a festival to talk about what we do, and I thought, well, it'd be a bit of a waste to just talk. Why don't we actually do a limited print run and see how that goes? And it went really well. We sold out every book that we had, and we were like, oh, let's try and do a few more limited print runs. And lo and behold, we were doing much better. And so we realized that people, despite the fact that print seems to be reducing, people who do consume comics or magazines, the people who do like print media, like it in print. There's something about the tactile nature of holding a book or a comic in your hand and turning the page that can't really be captured in a digital format right now. The Kugali anthology is available both in physical and digital. I mean, the vast majority of purchases are for physical. I'm talking about 70 to 80%, but we do make it in digital because at the end of the day, digital is inexpensive to produce and distribute. And some people, obviously digital is also more affordable as well. So the digital version makes it more accessible to people. So we keep both. KUGALI'S team at the top has the three co-founders. So there's myself, I'm the managing director. Then there's my co-founder, Tolu Foye, who's the chief operating officer. So what he does is he just makes sure he's on everybody's back, making sure that they hit all their deadlines. He cross-checks he crosses all the T's and dots all the I's and make sure that we deliver a product when we say we're going to deliver a product. And he also handles customer service as well. So he's always talking to the customers to make sure that the experience is a good one and to take in any comments or feedback. And he's also based in Lagos, Nigeria as well. So he represents the company over there, and he's helping us build a presence over there. Then there is Hamid Ibrahim, who is a former technical director at MPC. That name might not ring many bells, but they do a lot of animation for Disney primarily. So he's worked on films like Lion King, Predator. Don't want to get the list wrong because people in that industry are very, very pedantic about, oh, I worked on this and I didn't work on that. But point being is he's worked on a lot of Disney films, particularly for CGI. So he's the CG director at KUGALI, and what he's doing is he's helping us set up the pipeline for us to eventually go on to create animated films and potentially also other projects that involve computer-generated images like virtual and augmented reality. Everybody always asks me about Black Panther. I think we had a Kickstarter campaign around February, which is around the same time the film came out. And it's difficult to say how much, is it correlation or is it causation? It's difficult to discern what exactly it was. But certainly, I certainly think it probably helped because we received, at least I know that for a fact, we received one call purely due to Black Panther, which was CNN, who just wanted to know what we think about it. And obviously, once you get your brand name mentioned on CNN, it creates a lot of positive social proof. So what Black Panther has been able to do is been able to open a lot of windows that might have been closed. And I think it's also implanted a seed in a lot of people's minds that there's money to be made in showcasing African culture through a modern lens. But I think the important thing now, because as amazing as Black Panther was, it was ultimately a product of Disney. And what I want to see is African creators and people working on the ground with African artists, writers, and storytellers move into the foray and start to tell these stories so that Black Panther isn't the only staple that people have access to stories that are also created by people on the ground across the continent. Yes, Kugali means something that, well, actually, we got it from a phrase which was Kujali, and we were going to call the company Kujali to begin with, but someone had already bought the domain, so we swapped the J for a G. But the phrase Kujali means something important or something that matters in Swahili. I want Kugali to become an entertainment hub that provides millions, maybe even billions of people with the best storytelling experience that they can possibly get. And I mean through the lens of not just the comics that we're doing right now, but eventually cartoons, and also we're doing some work in augmented reality, which maybe will eventually start to dip our hands in virtual reality as well. But I just want people to think of Kugali and think, yes, these are the guys who tell these really, really awesome stories, and I want people to fall in love with the stories we tell. It's hard to nail the advice to one particular thing because there isn't exactly a magic formula, and I think different people respond in different ways. So some people need grit and determination, but I think beyond that, it's something akin to a higher purpose or a sense of love. I think that if there isn't some sort of bigger mission that you're setting out to achieve, or you don't love the work, then when things get really hard, when you're really being pushed to your limits, you will start to question why you're doing it. And if the why isn't strong enough, then you're likely to give up. So I'll go with that for today.